At this point in the workshop, participants used the tools learnt during the workshop to address a stated problem and develop recommendations. The recommendations were tailored to the particular circumstances and requirements of a chosen country within the CARIFORUM region.
So we look at the question number 2. What is the role of the National Council for Innovation and Competitiveness in ensuring the higher education sector in building an innovative society to support innovation and competitiveness in a regional country of your choice? Using the framework of innovation, discuss the current barriers with regard to higher education sector and what are the ways to remove such barriers. Who are the relevant actors needed to be involved to ensure the effective function of the Council? And what are the strategies and the policy for higher education sector to effectively support innovation process? Support and justify your policy proposal using statistical evidence. Now the issue for us is this: how can the Council bridge the gap between the higher education sector and the rest of the innovation system in order to achieve innovation and competitiveness for Barbados? That's the question and the issue that we're trying to solve. This is the question: how is higher education important to the innovation system? We see higher education as being important in terms of producing knowledge for the system. Also in terms of knowledge dissemination, because it's not just a question of the production of that knowledge, but how the knowledge disseminated across the entire system. Also how is that knowledge applied? So it's a question of the generation of the knowledge, the dissemination of the knowledge, and the application of that knowledge. The higher education system is also involved in terms of the enhancement of human resource and the intellectual capacity, that is capable of delivering, the producing the knowledge that is required. It is also important in terms of the promotion of the whole question of research and development. Now the role of the Council. Now we see several roles for the Council and all this. Barbados at this point in time does not have innovation and competitive council. So we are one of the countries in the Caribbean that we do not have a council as yet. You see the role as mapping of the appropriate skills, and when we're talking about appropriate skills, we're talking about the skills that are required in order to satisfy the demands of the private sector. Now we have, the Council also have a role in identifying the skills that are important to building what the knowledge-based society that we're looking to create. Also has a role in providing market research. Now how should the Council be constituted? Now the Council should be a high-level council, perhaps it should be attached to a ministry. We see the Council as a private, a public sector organization. Obviously, it will have representatives from the private sector, but in the main, it's going to be a public sector organization. Perhaps it could be a statutory corporation, which would probably give us a lot more autonomy than if it is within central government as part of a ministry operation. So it should be a high-level organization, perhaps attached to the Prime Minister's office or Ministry of Finance. It should be financed and provided for the organization. That's going to be very, very critical. If you say that it is an important organization, then it needs to be financed appropriately. Now, the legal status, we believe that it should be incorporated, and there should be laws governing the establishment of such a council. Now, we've heard about the example of Europeans and the laws and the fact that a lot of changes have taken place when there have been changes in government. Well, I don't think the situation is the same within the Caribbean. We tend to be slow in terms of changing of laws. So I believe that if the council if the council is incorporated and becomes a legal entity, perhaps that is the way forward for us in Barbados, because we tend to be slow at changes or making changes to legislation. So it means that with a change of government in office, chances are the operations and the main functions of this organization will continue. So we believe that there's benefit in having it attached to legislation. Now the relationships, and these are identifying the various actors that should be part of the process. We have higher education providers in the country, should be part, university, polytechnics, colleges, and we're talking about post-secondary education here, broad higher education, we're talking about post-secondary education, and that's why we included the polytechnics and the colleges, and we also included institutions that would normally be involved in skills delivery. We're also talking about chambers of commerce and industries. We're talking about ministries as well, education, finance, and commerce. I just identified 3, but I'm quite sure that there are more ministries that should be a part. And we believe that in terms of the boards, perhaps the organization might be a public company with a board of directors and so on. And you should have various representation on those boards, including some of the stakeholders that I mentioned here, as well as probably labor movement, NGOs and so on. Those have not been identified, but NGOs, labor organizations should become part of the board of the council. Now, these are some of the barriers that we have identified for the innovation system. It's basically a cultural approach to learning. I think this is really something that's very common throughout the Caribbean, where we're mostly involved in rote learning. That's one of the issues. There's insufficient linkages between the actors in the innovation system, and everyone have identified this as one of the challenges that faces us in the region, because we have poor capacity to innovate. Is the accessibility of, this is medium size, small and medium size enterprises in terms of affording skills. There's also financing as a barrier. Now that I've identified the barriers, and we're trying to identify how can we address some of the barriers. The role of the higher education system is changing how students are engaged. What we need to do is build more critical thinking within the educational system. They also need to be more experimental learning, where you actually learn by doing and incorporating that into the system. We also look at the balance between, we have to look at the balance between primary education and higher education, and where we focus the quantum of money in the education system. At this point in time, because we have a high enrollment at the primary level, the emphasis really should be more at the higher education level in terms of where we put our funds. The council role is to encourage government to provide incentives in terms of trying to change the curriculum, teaching methodologies and testing. And I said testing is critical, because if you're not testing people in a certain way, then the teachers, the instructors are not going to see it like being important to change the way that they're doing it. So you have to introduce the way how we test students. Insufficient linkages between actors in the innovation system. The role of the higher education is to improve and facilitate networks and partnerships among other actors in the system, providing training. Role of the council, and I'm speeding up because of the time indicator. We have to act as an interface between the private and public sector, both at the local, regional, and international level, to support partnerships. Things that you can do, for example, is seminars and workshops that can be mediums for promoting our partnerships. We also have to promote incentive schemes for innovation promotion. Now, one of the issues that we identify is accessibility, medium and small enterprises in terms of affording skills. Because it's one thing for the system to develop skills, But then there's a question of affordability. Higher education produces the skills, but let's say the private sector is not able to, to access the skills because of the cost of the skills that, that provided. So that is one challenge. Again, the higher education sector role and responsibilities to facilitate knowledge transfers, promote the establishment of private and public incubators. Financing. The Council's role is also to establish financial strategies, grant funding, academic entrepreneurship, create incentive for higher education to establish independent sources of funding. These are our action plans. You should have ongoing stakeholder consultation, identify priorities for implementation, implementation phases according to priority action, monitor and evaluating each stage of the implementation.